Hello people out there in YouTube land. Today we've got some nice primary school work for you in that we've got some cutting and sticking to get on with. I don't know if you remember that last time, or at least last time I was looking at my guitar build, I made a fretboard using some pre-drawn plans as the template. Well, today I think we're going to try and transfer some more of these plans onto this piece of MDF to try and get us a body template. If we've got enough time, we might then try and take that on to maybe even cutting the body piece. In addition to that, some more gluing potentially, in that I'd quite like to revisit the Scala amplifier grill cloth if we've got time. It was okay as it was from the last video, but at the same time it would be nice if we could get it looking a little less loose. So I'm thinking about trying to glue that down. Anything else? We might run out of time if we try to do anything else, but we'll make it up as we go along. So let's get cracking on this. So unfortunately, we are a little bit limited for space. I'm not going to be able to sort of spread the plans out and work on them all at once, but I'm only really interested in the body for now. So I'm just going to quickly cut out the piece of the plans that we are interested in. Now, do I need to preserve the neck is the question. I do have a second copy of the plans, it's worth probably mentioning at this point, but I think I do want to keep this neck piece complete, so I am actually going to cut around that, but when I cut the initial template I will imagine this line is still here, I think. Okay, so there we go. That's our rough body template shape cut out, complete with neck pocket. Next task is going to be to glue that to a piece of MDF. Because of the limited working space, as you can see, that would be a bit of a problem. I'm just going to chop a piece of this MDF off to the right size off camera, and then we'll stick it down. There we go, much more manageable piece. Just ignore that. I started off cutting it by hand and realised I could put it through the bandsaw. So there we go. That piece of paper will fit nicely on there. The only thing to do is glue it down. Just put a bit of scrap down there. Our old friend, the permanent spray adhesive. I'm going to go to town with this because last time when we tried it with the fretboard it seemed to work best if you effectively soak the paper in it. We'll set this over in one corner to dry for a moment. I don't think it's going to take very long at all. While that's drying, I want to revisit this. The Dallas amplifier. So, I don't know if you can tell with the lighting in here, but this grill cloth that I attached to the amplifier is fine. It looks absolutely great. But as you can probably tell when I'm touching it here, it's a little bit loose, and I can live with that, but while I've got the opportunity, I might as well see if I can make it a little bit better. So Let me just quickly get it out of the cabinet here and I'll show you what I mean. Normally, if you were going to recover a cabinet, what you would actually do is wrap the fabric around the edges, pull it tight and staple it down, with or without glue. Now, the original speaker grille cloth was very thin fabric, and it was only attached to the front. There was no wraparound on the edges. Because the baffle was quite a tight fit within the cabinet, if I was going to try and wrap this grille cloth around, it would mean that I was probably going to have to trim down the size of the baffle itself. And to be honest with you, I just took the path of least resistance on that one. I think we could get the fabric a little tighter than it currently is, and we could probably glue it down as well, which would at least stop it flapping about if it is a little bit loose. And then you might still see a little bit of a concave section where the speaker is, but that's kind of acceptable anyway. So if you bear with me, I'm going to try and get these old staples out without damaging the fabric too much. Thankfully the cloth's actually lost the desire to roll up that it had when it came in the postal tube. So I think the best way to go about this is going to be to spread some glue around here and then just hold it tight and staple it individually on each side as we go. Try and just get a little bit more tension in that cloth. I think I'm okay leaving this end attached as it is. Let's give that a go. So I've made a slightly unorthodox choice, I think, for the glue to use. This stuff was tempting, but I don't think it's quite going to have the sort of penetration to actually hold on to the cloth. It may well do. If I wasn't in such a hurry, I might have considered actually even just using some scrap bits of cloth to test different glues, but something tells me this stuff might not be a bad choice. It's Copydex is the brand name. It's actually like a latex based fabric glue which you can use to stick, well, fabrics together, but it's actually strong enough that it can hold tears in carpets and things like that as well. So I think it should have just enough hold that it should be quite good for this, but at the same time it's not so strong that if someone wanted to rip this fabric off in the future, it will give way without taking the wood with it. So I'm just going to actually sort of paste this on in fairly liberal amounts. Don't want it so thick that it's actually going to seep through the fabric, but I do want quite thick helping on there. Right, let's work fast before the glue dries. Trying to pay attention to the sort of grid pattern of the fabric, just to make sure that it doesn't go too askew. Alright, that's looking much better already, I think. Don't really have that obvious sag where the speaker was. Feels nice and tight across there. Probably still not going to be perfect, but to the eye there at the moment, that's looking a hell of a lot better. I'm just going to give these staples a little bit of a tap with a hammer to make sure they're right the way in. Looking good. Let's lay that off to one side to dry. Meanwhile, one glued down template. So we're going to have to cut this out somehow. I think what I'm going to do is try and get some practice on the little bandsaw and just try and cut round as close to the edge as possible without going over, and then we'll just finish it off by sanding. Just before I do actually go ahead and do that, I'm just going to draw a line in here by hand, because if you remember, we don't want the neck pocket to be on this template. Get this a bit of wood here. That'll do. Right, to the bandsaw. So there we go. Just cut that last little piece off using a normal jigsaw, which, to be fair, did the job absolutely fine as well. No need for one of these if you don't have one. Now, the ideal tools really to finish off this template would either be, or would be a combination of either like a belt sander or a disc sander and a bobbin sander. Something that's going to allow us to keep everything straight and true. I don't have that luxury. I did have lying around. Yeah, I did have these lying around, which are basically little sanding bits to go on the Dremel. I thought if I really wanted to, I could get this or maybe a slightly bigger version of this and actually mount it on the pillar drill and then just move it around the pillar drill, kind of like you would on a bobbin sander. I think that would work, but to be honest with you, I think I'm just going to go for it by hand. So, after a little experimentation with technique, I find that for the smaller curves, actually just going around with your thumb like that seems to be the best way to smooth out any lumps or bumps. For the longer curves, I found doing this. In one continual motion seem to help. But ultimately it's just about taking time, trying to get everything nice and smooth. It is, to be honest, more difficult than I thought to get all these curves perfectly smooth. I can kind of see why a lot of people say if you're just making a one-off guitar then it's almost not worth making templates, just because of the amount of effort you have to put into getting them right. But I still feel a lot more confident using the router table and whatnot if I have some templates. There we go. So I don't think it's perfect, but not a bad first attempt, I think. I think I'm going to be sitting refining this all night. Okay, so we'll have a quick tidy up and then move on to the next stage. Right, so there's a template that I'm happy with, but before I actually use it to cut into anything, I actually want to make a copy of this template because we're going to need multiple. There's one for the actual body itself, and then there's another one for the pickup routing and the neck routing at the very least. And it also means we get to keep a master copy of the template should one of them get damaged. So here's one I prepared earlier in Blue Peter style. So I think we're going to use the super glue and masking tape trick to stick that onto there. Well, hopefully that's dry. Certainly feels secure. So we'll give that a spin around. Well, we'll take off the majority of the material on the bandsaw again, and then we'll give it a spin around the router table. Well, there we have it. Time to head over to the router table. So for anyone who's not familiar with working with a router table and templates, bear in mind this is the first time I've done it as well, but the basic idea is that the cutting blade, which is spinning round here in the middle, has a bearing on the bottom which actually sticks out the same distance as the cutting blade. So if you rest that bearing up against something, it's not going to cut any further than that material. So that will effectively follow our template round and allow us to cut the other piece of material to exactly the same shape. In this case, the template is actually on the bottom, so I actually need to go around this way up. The one thing I need to do though before I start, I need to raise the router bit to the correct height. Thankfully, I've drilled a hole in the correct place on the table to use this handy little tool, which is provided with the router, to actually do that. Okay, so that's where it needs to be. Hopefully the router is good and tight in the table where it needs to be. Just grab some ear defenders here and we'll give it a go. I'm slightly worried that these are very cheap Chinese bits, but hopefully they should be able to cope with MDF okay. looking good to me. Have the router up to about half speed and you can see some burn marks in the wood there. There we have proof that the super glue and masking tape trick does actually work. Now, the piece of wood I've actually selected to make the back of the body is not mahogany. It is this colossal piece of wengi or wenge, or however you like to pronounce it, and it weighs an absolute ton. So as you can see, if I lay it over here, more than big enough to get a one piece body out of. Now, what I would already be doing is, again, taking this bit of wood to the bandsaw and cutting out the bulk of material from around the edges before I attempt to cut it down on the router. However, since it is such a nice piece of wood, I might see if I can actually just save a sliver off the edge of here, just to use for something else. It looks like there's a nice pattern going on here, which might actually just line up quite nicely with the centre of the guitar if I put it off centre here. This is a pretty heavy duty job for this bandsaw, but I think it should manage if we take it slow. My only little one criticism of it actually is that the fence itself isn't particularly good. It's not that it really moves as long as you've got it tight enough, it's more that it's just actually quite difficult to ensure that it's straight, but as we're just lobbing off excess here, I'm not too bothered. Lovely stuff. Wow, look at that grain pattern. Now I'm going to take off the excess around the edges on the bandsaw. I could have done that before gluing this on, but I like to have this on as a visual guide. It does mean I risk damaging the template, but it does make it a lot easier to see on the saw. I'm going to have to take it really slow with this, given how much or how little support the blade's got. Well, same again, although this time we're using much more dense wood. I'm not sure if this bit is going to cope, and we're going to have to do multiple passes to get the full height of the bit of wood as well, but let's see how we go. We do have some spare bits. They're all of this type, but we'll see what comes with it. First pass complete. Learning more and more about using the router table as we go. Definitely more likely to experience air out when you become parallel to the grain. We did actually get one nasty bit of kickback around here because I was probably misusing it, and we have had a little bit of tear out there which I'm going to have to fill, but not bad so far. Now we need to see how high we can get this router bit in order to do a second pass. So the first pass was pretty successful there. Obviously know full well I'm going to have to take probably at least 3 passes at this to get all the material off. This is the router bit I was using at about this depth. Now if the router will support it, I can quite happily run with the bearing on the material I've already cut. That's not a problem, but we can only get so far, probably up to about that height, before the collet will start getting in the way. I could take the template off, that's not a problem, but we still couldn't go any further than this. I do have a slightly longer bit which will get up to what? About there. Still not going to go all the way. You can get these bits where the bearing is on the top, which would be the ideal solution here. May end up having to order one of those. We'll see how we go. For now, we'll do another pass. I think hit the maximum height there with this bit. Actually guys, on second thoughts, it's getting on for 7 o'clock at night now. I don't really want to be making all this noise taking another pass off this. So I think I'm going to pack up for the night and carry on with this tomorrow. But before I go, this little piece of tear out that we got on the first pass, might be a good idea to fill that with dust and glue and allow that to cure overnight. So let's just quickly do that. Just going to put some rough stuff in first of all. Put a couple of drops on it. I'm going to take the template off first so it doesn't get stuck. Just then going to take a little bit of the fine stuff that I saved earlier. Well, that's it for today. We're going to carry on right where we left off tomorrow. So until next time, goodbye.